Hello and welcome to another episode of Dawncast. I'm Dai Lee, and it's a real honour to actually have Associate Professor Carolyn Ford joining us to talk about ovarian cancer. Just a quick little introduction to Professor Ford. She established her lab at the Lowy Cancer Research Group in 2010, following her international postdoctoral fellowships at the University of Toronto, Canada, and Lund University of Sweden. So welcome and thank you for joining us. Should I call you Professor Ford?
Certainly not. Please call me Caroline.
So thank you for giving us your valuable time to talk about the work that you do. Tell me, how are you going, first of all? How are you faring in this COVIDian time, as I call it?
I like this time. I'm calling it the weirds. I'm finding it particularly strange. I'm finding it really positive in a lot of ways, really challenging in a lot of ways. We've had to shut down our laboratory work for about the last 8 weeks. So that's been really challenging, having scientists that are used to performing experiments in a lab and interacting with patients in the hospital suddenly now working from home offices. So that's been a huge adjustment for our team. Yeah. But actually, I think ultimately very, very positive. And the good news is that we're looking at reopening the lab next week, actually, and people are going to get back in there and get back on board with our experimental work.
Oh, wow. So for those 8 weeks, did that mean that you had to stop, like your research work kind of came to a halt?
So no, nothing came to a halt. What it meant is that we were doing lots of analysis online. We do a lot of bioinformatics, so actually looking at biological and clinical data, things like the genetics of ovarian cancer, and those are all things that we can do on a computer. So it meant that people were doing analysis, and we were also writing up publications and manuscripts, and we were also continuously writing grant applications. That's a huge part of my job, so that's computer work. So we've been actually quite productive. The biggest challenge, I think, has been keeping the team connected, which I think is across all sectors, trying to lead a team and keep everyone feeling connected and included has been the hardest part.
How big is the team?
So my group at the moment is about 8 scientists, and they range from really junior researchers that are completing their research year in an undergraduate degree to PhD students to what we call postdoctoral fellows, who are people that have done a PhD and then are doing some further training. And we also work with a lot of clinicians and doctors and nurses at the hospital, primarily the Royal Hospital for Women in Sydney. So yeah, a lot of our work is collaborative beyond our small team.
So what is ovarian cancer, and how many people does it take, like kill on an annual basis?
So ovarian cancer, I guess the thing that I often tell people is what ovarian cancer is not, because many people, and particularly in Australia, but also in lots of different communities, I still think have a fairly high degree of discomfort when we talk about women's reproductive organs. Many highly educated women and men are still a little bit confused and embarrassed about, okay, what's actually your ovaries? What's your cervix? What's your uterus? And many women mistakenly think that a pap smear tests for ovarian cancer, and that's a really successful cancer screening test, but it actually tests for cervical cancer, which is a completely different part of the anatomy. So ovarian cancer is cancer of your ovaries. So a woman is usually born with 2 ovaries, and ovarian cancer can arise in the ovaries or the fallopian tube. And in Australia, it's about 1,600 women a year that are diagnosed. So that's about 4 women a day are diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And unfortunately, 3 women every day in Australia die from ovarian cancer.
Wow. So, but are they linked? Like you said, they're not linked, but does that having ovarian cancer that lead to cervical cancer, and is that connected somehow, or you can have ovarian cancer and not have any other thing?
They can be completely unlinked, actually. They're quite unique organs and parts of our body. Interestingly, ovarian cancer is linked to breast cancer. So some of the genes that we know are linked to hereditary breast cancer also predispose women to developing ovarian cancer. So that's why many breast cancer survivors also remain at an elevated risk of developing ovarian cancer, and they may make decisions such as prophylactic surgery, as in removing their ovaries to reduce that risk.
Ah, okay. Because I am a breast cancer survivor, and
Oh, wow.
you just triggered in me the memory that I actually had to go and had some tests to see whether or not I had the genetics, the BRCA genes. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And they said if I had the BRCA genes, apparently that they would have to do a hysterectomy. I mean,
Mm,
like that was a really like I'm thinking, what does it mean? They're taking my ovaries out and everything. Luckily, I didn't have a BRCA gene, but now that
yes.
you've just reminded to me, there is a link between breast cancer and ovarian cancer.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's very confronting for many women because our ovaries are our ability to have children. They also are important in our secretion of hormones, and it's a huge part of being a woman. So anything that affects this area of the body is tied up with a lot of emotions, also a lot of stigma, and certainly. One thing that I'm very keen to promote is for women to be much more aware of their own body and to not be self-conscious about any unusual symptoms that they might have, or to feel awkward if they have changes in menstruation or changes in how things feel down there, that they should feel comfortable to go and speak to their GP about that, and even to speak to their girlfriends about what's normal. I think we're not particularly great in women's health at having conversations about, what's premenopause feel like, or what's an unusual menstrual cycle. And certainly in many cultures in Australia, that's even more so, that you just certainly do not speak about those things, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, with breast cancer, you can say, you've got a lump. I last week a friend of mine said, "Oh, I need to see you because I think I found a lump." I said, "Well, you need to see a doctor. You don't need to see me. No, but I need you to actually feel the lump so that to see." I said, "But even if I felt the lump, I don't know. You still should see a doctor." But she wanted to see me first, and like really, I kind of was feeling the lump for her, but for that's breast cancer. So with ovarian cancer, how are you going to detect if you've got ovarian cancer?
Yeah, and look, this is one of our biggest challenges in this disease. So it's not as obvious as a lump. So many women that have really aggressive ovarian cancer have no symptoms at all. However, there are a few clear signs, and those are things like what most women notice is increased abdominal size. So they get really, really bloated, but to a fairly extreme level. They can also have a feeling very full, even if they've only eaten a little bit. So not only a lack of appetite, but suddenly, you only eat a small amount of food and you feel extremely full. It can feel a little bit, for women that have experienced pregnancy, a little bit like pregnancy, when you feel that there's pressure in your abdomen and pressure on your bladder. So none of the symptoms of ovarian cancer are the sorts of things that necessarily are huge red flags, and send women off to their doctors. So that is why one of the biggest goals worldwide for ovarian cancer research is to develop an early detection test. So what my lab at the University of New South Wales and what many researchers across the world are trying to do is develop a blood test where women, when they go in for their pap smear or some other regular test at their GP, they could simply just have some blood taken, and we could look for the very, very earliest signs of a change from a normal cell into an ovarian cancer cell, so that we can pick it up early. Because even now, if we manage to diagnose a woman with ovarian cancer at an early stage, which is called stage 1, the success rates are great. They're over 90% survival rates. They're on par with the great success we have in treating breast cancer in this country and around the world. The problem is currently most women are diagnosed at the later advanced stages that we call stage 3 or 4. And that's when the cancer has already spread or metastasized throughout the body. And that makes it extremely challenging to treat because people describe it as like grains of sand throughout the body. To be able to actually remove all of that tumor from a woman or to treat with a drug is extremely challenging.
So how far are you with the research into that blood test?
Yeah, so as I said at the beginning, I've got quite a small team, but they're really clever. So we think we're onto a really interesting idea where we're looking at the idea of cell-free DNA. So it's this kind of cool thing that when you have a tumor growing in your body, even if it's really, really tiny and so tiny that you might not even detect it on a screen, that tumor releases DNA into our bloodstream, and that we can look for specific genetic markers and specific genes being turned on or off in that DNA in a woman's blood that would be like a red flag or would highlight the fact that there's an early tumor growing, and then we could go in with other tests and surgery to remove it. So we think that's an interesting approach that at the moment, what we're trying to do is just ensure that that test is as specific and sensitive as possible. A lot of medical research, not to get too ranty, has been generally conducted by men and has not often appreciated some of the complexities of women. And so we need to think about things like the fact that women are menstruating, and every woman is on a different stage of her cycle all of the time, and that affects what happens in her body. That many women have other conditions like endometriosis or polycystic ovary disease, or they may be getting fertility treatment. So we need to be really, really careful that our ovarian cancer test only tests for ovarian cancer, and that it's not picking up just a normal fluctuation that most women would have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But so that's challenging. So are you close to getting that test, that accuracy of that test?
Yeah,
delivered?
So we're spending a lot of time actually looking at healthy women and trying to look at healthy women at different stages in their cycle to see what changes. We're also looking at women that have some of these other conditions like endometriosis to rule them out. So we're going through sort of a very strategic process of elimination to get the best set of genes that will be specific for ovarian cancer. So yeah, I'm very hopeful that we can get there. It just is going to take time, and it takes research funding to actually make that happen.
Yeah. So the two question is how long to go do you think you'll get there, and is there funding available?
Yeah, so I mean, it's just a matter of sort of input in is actually going to be the impact. So we've seen in the example of breast cancer that survival rates for breast cancer in the 1970s were sitting at around 70%. We had a huge influx of not only sort of public awareness of breast cancer and pink ribbon campaigns and all of the amazing fundraising that's been done, lobbying by women that survived breast cancer, more research funding into it. And that has had a direct impact on not only the screening for that disease, but the types of drugs and therapies we have available. So breast cancer survival is now over 95%, which is an incredible result. And you're a beautiful example of that. Ovarian cancer rates of survival are around 43% and have sat at that level for the last 30 or 40 years.
Wow.
And it's really because we just have not had the level of investment in research that we've had in other diseases. It's not that it's inherently more challenging or difficult. It just means we need to focus on it and we need to invest more money. We had a wonderful day. Last Friday was World Ovarian Cancer Day.
Yes.
And we had a very happy day as we were one of the research teams that was awarded. We got $2.7 million from the federal government, the Medical Research Future Fund, which is
Congratulations.
Absolutely remarkable. It's a team led by Nicola Bowden, who's a good friend of mine, an associate professor up at the University of Newcastle. And the government actually invested $16 million in ovarian cancer research just a few days ago. this is the biggest thing to happen to ovarian cancer research in my lifetime in this country. It will make a huge difference, and it's very, very welcome, but it's still an absolute drop in the ocean. $16 million might sound like a lot of money, but it's not compared to what we need and what is invested in other types of disease research across the country.
So that funding that was announced recently, that your team and the community who are the champions of ovarian cancer must have feel like jumping over the moon at this time, especially COVIDian time, whereby a lot of the funding and resources have gone into everything COVID, hasn't it?
That's right. And look, I think it was an absolute testament to work of groups like Ovarian Cancer Australia, but also some really remarkable patient advocates. So particularly a journalist called Jill Imbecile, who was an ABC journalist who was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and sadly passed away in December of last year. She was the most incredible advocate for this disease. She went and met with Greg Hunt. She is absolutely one of the reasons that this money came through. And I think it's a sad state of affairs for ovarian cancer that because the survival is so awful for this disease, we don't have an army of ovarian cancer survivors out there to speak about this disease. Most women that have ovarian cancer die very quickly from it. They are very unwell. It's very shocking to their family. So one really nice initiative of the last few years that Jill herself was an important part of was something called Pink Meets Teal, and it was about getting breast cancer survivors like yourself, Di, to actually advocate for their sisters that are dying of ovarian cancer and say, look, we're the example of where we have benefited from medical research and the advances that we've had. So now we're going to use our voices and platform to actually help out our sisters who have this other horrendous disease.
Oh, absolutely. If there's anything I can do in that space, let me know, because I am part of the breast cancer trials research group. They
Wonderful.
asked me to share their story, my story with them. I'm part of New South Wales Cancer Council. A lot of their ongoing fundraising and awareness raising activities, I take part in that as well. So if there's anything, and that's the reason why I wanted to understand the work around ovarian cancer research with you today, so that actually can promote that as well. So what drove, what is it that drives you around ovarian cancer research? Why did you choose this particular field to look into?
Yeah, I think I often get asked that, and I wish I had a sort of pithier response. I think it's just, I've always loved science. I've been fascinated by disease and trying to understand mechanisms of disease and how we can treat them for a very, very long time. I actually trained as a virologist. So my PhD was in virology and looking at viruses that are associated with cancer. So it's an interesting time for me with COVID-19 because all of my peers and my old PhD supervisor is in the news every day, and I feel a faint sort of longing for my for my days of virology. But I think what drove me about ovarian cancer was really, I guess, my desire as a feminist to try to actually rebalance this inequity that we have in women's health, that we don't necessarily focus on women beyond maybe their ability to procreate and once they get through pregnancy we're kind of done with them. And I think unfortunately
going downhill then from then after giving birth.
I think because people find it awkward or weird or whatever it is. And also medical research and the whole STEM sector is still very unequal in regards to men and women. We don't have equity at the senior level. So a lot of the research labs are run by men and will focus on something that they deem to be important. Yeah. And so I thought, if I've got the ability to lead a team and focus on something, then what an opportunity to make a difference.
You are known as the superstar of STEM. The science, technology, engineering, isn't it? And you champion a lot for that because you believe that there are not enough women in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like in any sector, we need to encourage the most diverse team as possible. if we want to come up with innovative solutions. So
Agree.
we get nowhere with, kind of groupthink and only one idea. So I love having men and women in my team. I like having people from different cultures, from different backgrounds, but also with different training. So people that have like a bioengineering training or a medical training or a scientific training, and having those discussions with a diverse group is where we get the most interesting and innovative solutions, which is what we need.
And in 2018, you founded the Feminist book club, which is a global and virtual community focusing on feminism and women in STEM. Tell us a little bit about that. Is that I hear that's growing quite rapidly.
Yeah, it's a little unexpected. So that was not planned. That was really just I was, on my summer holiday, and I'd recently joined Twitter, and I saw that another female academic at Sydney Uni had tweeted that she was reading a brilliant book called Inferior by a British author, Angela Saini, that I was also reading. And so I tweeted back and said, it would be fantastic to discuss this together. Maybe we should have a glass of wine and a chat. And she said, yeah, let's, have a book club of women in STEM. And so we tweeted about it, and it just went a little bit bananas. And we now have women all over the world and men that join in our discussions. And there's pre-COVID-19, there were physical meetups in cities like Istanbul and New York and Sydney and Melbourne and all over the place. And it's become a really lovely community of like-minded individuals that, really want to change what STEM looks like in the future.
How do you think COVID-19 will change the work for scientists like yourself?
Look, I'm fairly concerned, to tell you the truth. I think it's not going to be great for women in science particularly. I think many women are juggling the homeschooling and the caring responsibilities. I myself have 2 young kids, and I know the last 8 weeks have been absolute mayhem. And I think that is a little bit of a worry, and particularly if this is prolonged and people need to make decisions about who might be the primary carer for kids, that could lead to more women being forced out of research careers. I'm also worried in Australia, a lot of medical research is supported in the university sector, and as your viewers would be aware, there's been a huge impact of COVID-19 on funding for research at universities due to the drop in international students. And so there was a report released this week that suggested that maybe 7,000 research jobs would be lost across Australia this year. And that would be an absolute tragedy, because these are the researchers that are coming up with new treatments. These are the researchers working on COVID-19 diagnostics and vaccines, and these are the people we might lose. So I'm currently very concerned. I know there's a lot of lobbying going on, and we're hopeful that maybe there'll be some sort of rescue package, but for women in particular, this is going to be tough.
So any hope, like in terms of any great opportunities out of COVID-19?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think
Please give us hope.
Yes. No, I think there's 2 excellent things. So one is, so a big part of research is having to travel internationally and go to conferences and meet with our peers and present data and keep up to date. And that has always been a massive barrier, particularly for women in STEM that might have young kids or might be breastfeeding. To be able to fly off to America and Europe a few times a year is very hard. All of those big international conferences have now very rapidly gone online, and it means that we can all log on and it's equal. We don't have to worry about being excluded from the conversation that happens in New York at the big international conference of XYZ. We can be part of it. It's made everyone understand about working from home and working flexibly. I think that will change. And I think it will be better in the long run, because I think people are having an appreciation of what productivity means and how you can actually get the most out of your team and recognize that they are a whole person, that they're not just this image you get at the workplace from 9 to 5, that life is messy. They have kids, they have pets, they have
That's the reality of life, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's making us connect with each other. I'm hoping in a much more caring and understanding way.
Last question. What do you think of the anti-vaccination? Obviously, there's been a lot in recent weeks about vaccination.
I think it's I think it's really unfortunate. I think the evidence for the positive effects of vaccination are so far stacked in one direction that it is difficult for me as a scientist to understand. Another positive effect of COVID-19 that I didn't mention that directly relates to this is, I think, maybe for the first time in my career, scientists are being listened to. So we are being recognized as the experts, and people are turning to your Norman Swans and all of the people out there that are voices of reasons, that are the great science communicators we have in Australia. And so I'm hopeful that this means that people appreciate that scientists undergo massive amounts of training, that we are very rigorous, we attempt to be as unbiased as possible, and that we should be listening to our experts in this area. We shouldn't be listening to Facebook posts or a blogger or someone that has an opinion about something. We should be looking at evidence for all of these things. So I'm hopeful that maybe scientists will rise in the public esteem.
Yeah, I think so. I think with viruses everywhere now, obviously it's not, in the past it was the financial crisis, so you turn to the bankers and to the financial advisors, and now because the virus has come into play, or it kind of seemed to disrupt the world everywhere, everybody, so scientists are now, I think, will be the rising. There'll be the rising experts,
the rise of the scientists.
Yes, the rising scientists.
Like
even though there seems to be, there could potentially be loss of research jobs, but I think more and more you would want, because people are talking about the virus COVID-19 mutating into another, another form. So I'm sure scientists will be talking about it, and I'd love to get touch base with any of your virologists contacts to talk about that. Would be great.
Absolutely. I can send you some names.
Fantastic. Look, thank you so much for your time, and I know how busy you are, working from home and all of that, and I wish, we wish you wonderful going back next week. Look, are you looking forward to that?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Back into the lab, putting on your white coat and everything, and starting to...
That's right. Looking down the microscope, the stereotype is real. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and we appreciate your time. That's it from us from Dawncast. We're always eager to hear your story, so please do reach out to us and tell us if you've got a great story to share. In the meantime, do subscribe, click on the link below, or click like, and we'll come back again next time with a wonderful story to share. See you then. Bye.